There's also San Diego State basketball news. We'll catch up with Mark Zeigler momentarily. He wrote an article this afternoon about a Rutgers grad transfer that will visit San Diego State beginning tonight. This grad transfer goes by the name of Mawot Mag. He's a 6'7" forward from South Sudan. The Aztecs have had like a Sudanese pipeline, so to speak, because you've had Aguaka Rope and J. Pal Magun Gwath is of South Sudanese descent. So there have been a handful of players. So it'll be interesting to see that they've got one remaining scholarship. Is this how they elect to use it? We'll catch up with Mark right now, who does such a good job, of course, covering San Diego State men's basketball in the Union-Tribune. We always appreciate his time as there is news. He's reporting here today that there is a grad transfer from Rutgers that we just talked about, Mawot Mag, that will visit San Diego State this week, beginning tonight, 6'7", from South Sudan via Australia. So, Mark, we appreciate it. You're reporting on this. He spent 4 years at Rutgers. What type of player is he, and how would you see the fit if he ultimately comes to San Diego State?
Well, if you were to create a player from scratch that would be, you'd say this is a San Diego State player, this would be him. He's 6'7", so they like length. He's long. He's really athletic. He's really versatile, so he could probably guard at least 4 positions, maybe all 5. He's elite defensively. I mean, opposing coaches talk about how, Rutgers had a very good defense. He was the whole thing. I mean, he could just do everything, cover for everybody, switch screens, get his hands on balls, erase mistakes, all those things. And he's from South Sudan, or he was born there and then left during the Civil War. And as we know, San Diego State now has quite a long line of South Sudanese players or players whose parents are from South Sudan. And they just really seem to fit. And I think he'd be a really good fit. Now, will he come? We'll find out. He's here on the visit. He gets here tonight. He'll be on the visit Wednesday and part of Thursday, and we'll see what he decides. But in terms of the type of player that they're looking for, I think it's exactly what they want and need.
Yeah, and the chances of landing him, you would say, are?
I would think they're pretty good. Look, he graduated today at Rutgers and is getting on a plane tonight to fly to San Diego. So it tells me 2 things. It tells me he's serious about his academics, wanting to finish up and get his degree. And also tells me he's serious about San Diego State because he quickly got on a plane to San Diego State to check it out. So I think he's pretty serious. And look, the X factor in all this is Agueka Rope, who is also from South Sudan and also Dinka tribe, which he is, I believe, as well. So there'll be a definitely connection there. I mean, in the South Sudanese community across the country, AG is revered. I mean, he played in the Final Four. It's what every kid grows up dreaming to do, and not very many South Sudanese players have done that. And so I think there'll be an instant connection, and I think that's sort of a secret sauce to San Diego State recruiting, particularly with these players.
Mark Zeigler from the UT with us right now on John and Jim. You also wrote about the quote-unquote newcomers. I mean, the transfers coming in, there'll be freshmen as well. What's your overall takeaway from the class they're bringing in via the portal? Nick Boyd, Wayne McKinney III from USD, and then obviously Jared Coleman-Jones, who they're bringing in, the 6'10" center with a really good offensive game. And then we've talked obviously about Mawot Mag. We'll see if he ultimately signs with San Diego State or not. But what's your kind of takeaway in terms of what Brian Dutcher and his staff have been able to accomplish?
Well, they resisted kind of what you see a lot around the country. And I think a lot of people get caught up with who won the transfer portal. Mm-hmm. And they look at stats and they look at, what they averaged their last school. And they don't really look at whether that player fits into a style or a system. I think a lot of coaches now are just collecting talent and hoping, that believe enough in their own ability to stick them into a system and get them playing together in a very short period of time. I'm sensing that San Diego State's taking a different approach to this, partly because they just don't have the NIL to go after some of these guys, but partly because they're all about fit and they're all about culture, and they want to bring in guys that are going to understand that culture and embrace it. And so all 3 of these guys, when I talk to them, the first thing they say is, I just want to win. I'm just coming here to win. And this is a program that wins. And I don't care about my stats, and I don't care about anything. I just want to win. And so they've gotten those type of players. And I mean, Wayne McKinney, particularly, I mean, I talked to him, and he must have said, I want to win, 15 times in about a 8-minute interview. I mean, it just kept saying it over and over again. And it wasn't just lip service. He really means it. And he didn't win that much at USD. He really wants to win now. Nick Boyd is a winner. He took, he was a point guard and leader on a team that went to the Final Four from an even smaller conference than San Diego State, and very impressive with Florida Atlantic. And then Jared Coleman-Jones, I was really blown away when I spoke with him. Really, really mature guy. Talked a lot about, look, I'm not a great defensive player, and I want to become good defensively, and I'm not going to play at the next level if I don't become good defensively. And this was a no-brainer for me. And there were some other really big-time schools that were interested in him, and he just canceled all the visits to him as soon as San Diego State offered him. And so they all kind of have that same attitude and coachability, and I think Mag would fit into that group as well. So there is a similarity in the players they're bringing in. It might not be in the big numbers or the power, all from power conference schools, but this is a similarity.
It's not official yet, but this NIL tournament is going to happen. San Diego State likely going to be in this tournament. The impact that this thing is going to have on this year's team and program are what?
Well, I think the biggest impact might even be next year, because look, the NIL, you just don't know what it's going to be one year to the next. And they raised a ton more money. I mean, the Mace Foundation did an incredible job. Jeff Smith worked really hard, and people forget this guy has a real big time job in real estate, and he's doing this all on his own time on the side because he loves the program. And so he got him over $1 million. And I think if all of us would have said, $1 million, in the spring of 24, you're going to be right there. Well, as we've seen in the last few days, particularly with Ray Osobor going to Washington for a reported $2 million, that's not anywhere near enough. And I think what this NIL tournament does is it instantly doubles that to $2 million. It's still not in the ballpark of some of the top teams in the country, the Sweet 16 type teams they've been competing with, but it gets them a lot closer. And I think the key is, and we talked about this before, is, unlike previous seasons, San Diego State has played very veteran lineups. A lot of guys graduating, a lot of guys moving on COVID years. Next year, they're going to be playing a lot of, it's not, the whole team's not going to be young and freshmen, but they are going to probably play some freshmen or redshirt freshmen or sophomores and in pretty significant minutes. And if one or two or three of them blow up and have a big season, people are going to come after them with some big money NIL. And that's where I think that extra $1 million from the NIL tournament helps. And the ability to earn more money in future years as a 3-year commitment helps them maybe keep one or two or all of them, those young guys. And that's where the NIL is really, the rubber is really going to hit the road in San Diego State. I think it's going to be next spring. Mark
Zeigler, UT, with us right now on John and Jim. I'm curious to get your opinion on this, Mark. What's the impact of this NIL tournament on other quote unquote preseason events? They're called MTEs, but for our listeners, so like those tournaments that occur in November and December. Like, what does this mean for the Maui Invitational? And what does this mean for San Diego State's future in playing an event like the Maui Invitational, now that they're committed to Vegas potentially for 3 years, which makes a lot of sense because of the financial implications of it?
Well, you saw today the Maui Invitational announced its field for 2025, which to me is a little interesting that they're looking that far ahead and trying to lock teams in. I think in these events, you're going to see much bigger buyout clauses to get out of them, particularly something like Maui. We know the Rady Children's Invitational that was at UCSD last year is supposed to have Notre Dame in November over Thanksgiving week. Notre Dame's supposed to be in this NIL tournament. The buyout's $200,000, which if you're going to a tournament that's going to pay you $1 million in each of 3 years is nothing. You pay it, you move on. And so I think you'll see bigger buyouts, but I also think you're going to see some of these fields start to shrink unless they can go find comparable money. And you saw Creighton just pulled out the Battle for Atlantis, which many people consider the second biggest non-conference tournament after Maui. They pulled out of that. I suspect we'll see in the next week or so, you'll see Notre Dame officially pull out of the Rady Children's Invitational. And the Maui field that was announced for 2025, it's okay, but there's not a lot of blue bloods in it. And I think the blue bloods are all going to be coming to this NIL event. next year. And so it's going to be a shift. The question is going to be, the money people behind this are obviously going to be willing to lose money in the early years. And whether this is sustainable beyond those 3 years is the big question. But I think in the short term, it's going to affect those tournaments. And you'll see diminished fields, and you'll see all those big teams trying to get into the NIL deal in Vegas or other similar NIL tournaments popping up around the country.
What, in your opinion, you think the reasons were that Jaden wasn't invited to the NBA Combine?
Age.
Yeah.
I think it just comes down to that. Look, there's been plenty of tape out there. There's plenty of evidence. The guy averaged 30 a game the first 2 games of the NCAA tournament, and then he played the clear best team in the country, not even close. In the Sweet 16, had 15 in the first half with Donovan Clingan, who could be the number 1 pick in the draft, covering him. So there's no doubt he's of his ability. I think the thing that NBA teams look at, and maybe to a fault, is that he's going to be 25 in July. By the time you get done with your first NBA contract, you're close to 30. And it's just they'd rather have a guy who's 19 and develop him and get him in his, the big production years of, 24 to 28. And so I think that's the biggest issue with him. But the flip side of this is, I think he'll end up having a better chance, I don't know if this makes sense or not, of sticking with an NBA team if he is not drafted. Because you don't want to get picked by those teams in the 50 to 60 range. Those are all playoff teams. Those are all teams contending for the title. Those are all teams with rosters that are set. It's hard to crack those. This way, if he doesn't get drafted, he can pick his team, pick a spot that he thinks he has the best chance of playing. You look at Nathan Mensah, he ended up with Charlotte. Not a great team, but he got into the NBA, got minutes in the NBA. If he had been on, Denver or someone else, he might not have seen the floor. So I think he'll have a shot still, and he's a finished product. He's ready to go, and maybe some team sees something in him and he performs, and he could be ready to play this year. But I think it just comes down to age, to answer your question.
Mark, you look at some of the players that have left via the portal. Obviously, Lamont, talked about significantly heading to Kentucky, and then Elijah was a late entrant into the portal. He ends up at the University of Virginia. Micah, we learned early on, ends up at Ohio State. What do you think? And I know we're so far out, but how will these players fit? Obviously, NIL is a part of the conversation, you would think, to some level for some of these players, but maybe it's not the only part of it. How will they do in their next stops?
It's going to be really fascinating to watch. I think it'll be interesting to see if any of them start. I don't think Micah will start. I don't think Elijah will start based on their roster. Lamont, you'd think, would start, but they just got Kerkrisa from West Virginia, who started a ton of college basketball games just as Lamont has, and is a point guard. So maybe they'll start both of them together, or maybe one of them comes off the bench. So that will be a position battle, and we'll have to wait and see on that one. But it's hard, particularly when you've been in a program like a guy like the Lamont. He's been in the program for 4 years. He knows exactly what's expected of him. He knows exactly what his role is. He knows exactly what the defenses are. He knows the terminology, the surroundings. He's a very family-oriented guy. It's Southern California. He knows everybody. And to go from that to, Big Blue Nation, which is, it's just different. It's huge, and it's, fans everywhere and websites everywhere and media everywhere, huge arena. That's going to be a shock to the system, and it's going to be a tough adjustment. That's not just for him, for any player. Ohio State, similar thing. Virginia, these are all big schools, power conferences. So it's going to be an adjustment for all of them, particularly, Elijah will have an extra year, so maybe we shouldn't judge him on his first year, but the other guys are going to have 1 year to get it done, and we'll have to see how quickly they can adjust.
I thought that was my last question. I have one more. Keyshawn Johnson, you think he'll ultimately get drafted?
I think he has a chance to get drafted. He's done very well at Combine. He has the type of body they like. If he shoots it well enough, in the drills and then in these games, I think someone will take a chance on him. The other thing to remember, this is the worst draft and probably considered the weakest draft in probably 20 years. And so that's a great spot to be in for a player who's, kind of a second round player like Keyshawn, or projected second round guy. another year he might not even be drafted, and not because he's not a good player, but just because it's so loaded, whether with foreigners or youngsters coming in the draft or whatever it is. This is a good year for college players to hop in there. He'll have a little bit of issue with his age as well. He's not as old as Jaden, but he's still older and played 5 years of college. But I think he's got a shot. Certainly can defend everybody athletically. His wingspan, his vertical, his size, his hands, all those measurables were off the charts. And so I think he piqued the interest of a bunch of NBA teams. So he'll be interesting to watch on draft night for him.
It's going to be a fascinating couple of weeks, both with San Diego State, obviously, and also with some of their former players as well. Mark, we always appreciate your time. Great reporting as always, and we hope to connect again soon. But thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you guys.
All right. Great stuff. Mark Zeigler from the Union-Tribune. I mean, what he was telling us about this potential fit between this visitor coming in, this grad transfer, Mawot Mag. Yeah, Mawot Mag, 6'7", played 4 years at Rutgers. I just saw a video. It ends up in my timeline, Jim.
He's the greatest player ever.
There was a post-game video from Kevin Willard, who was the head coach at either Seton Hall or Maryland at the time. And he said, I've been coaching a long time, and I very rarely have ever seen a defender like this. That, to me, screams San Diego State.
Yeah, everybody that got upset and may have, I'm not saying anybody did, but may have questioned the program or Dutch or anything, if they land this kid and he does pan out to be this defensive monster that is being advertised.
Right.
Whenever in the future something happens with transfers with San Diego State, just remember, Dutch is pretty good at this stuff.
It's amazing, Jim, in my opinion, and we'll see if they land this player or not, how they find players that fit them. Like kind of Mark said, they don't find stars. Like They're not like, oh, this is a 5-star. And they've had really high-level players, obviously. But they find players that fit what they do. Like I think about Nick Boyd, like under-recruited, chip on shoulder, won at a really high level. We talked to him.
Yeah.
He just wants to win. Wayne McKinney is like, as Mark said, like, I just want to win. Under-recruited, right? Has dealt with adversity in his career. Jared Coleman-Jones, he said, is mature beyond his years. And then this sounds like almost the perfect fit.
It does.
Potentially. And then you'll see what comes of it. But this type team, we'll see if it plays out like this. Like, I have a feeling that this is the type of San Diego State basketball team that people might sleep together. You know, like they're not going to go into the year like ranked 15th in the AP poll. It changes, but that doesn't mean they're not capable of winning at a high level like they've done a ton, obviously, with Brian Dutcher.
If they get this transfer from Rutgers,
Right.
There are still some things about this team, like going forwards, looking at the roster. Like, I still think they need a little more shooting. And that is always kind of been their Achilles heel, is their shooting from the field, and especially their 3-point shooting. Now, their Final Four national championship game team was really good shooting wise because Adam Seiko, Matt Bradley, Keshad,
to some extent
was better from 3 than most people might have thought.
Who else on that team could hit threes? Because they had other players other than Bradley and Seiko.
I mean, Lamont.
Oh, Micah Parrish, was a good 3-point shooter.
So you had two sharp shooters in Micah and Seiko. You had a very competent 3-point shooter in Bradley. You had a guy that could make some threes in Lamont, who hit a game winner
he hit a lot that year. Yeah.
So that, to me, is still kind of the question with this team, is are they going to have enough shooting? Like, defensively, if they get this guy from Rutgers, they're going to be probably really good defensively, right? Magoo Guath, the size, the length there. Miles Heide getting to his second year. The length of Miles Bird, McKinney. Like, you can have a good defensive team, but are we going to be looking at another team that has to win games 52-48? Or are we going to be looking at a team that can get you in the 70s with their shooting and their scoring? That's going to be the question mark going into this 100%. Year if they land this recruit.
Yeah, the other
in the portal.
Right. And the other conversation we had, and we'll get back to the Padres on the other side, was like Mark made some really good points on, like, okay, Jaden didn't get an invite. It's crying over spilled milk at this point. The combine's going on. So whatever. It'll be over in 3 days or whatever it is. But like this guy went toe to toe with some really good players in the NCAA tournament the last 2 years, including this April or late March with Donovan Clingan. Had that brilliant first half, and then the Aztecs in general kind of ran out of steam in the second half. But like Ledee, we said this yesterday, Jim. Ledee has proven, I am fully convinced of it, he can play in the NBA. I am convinced of it. Now, he has to have that opportunity. He can't create that for himself. Others need to play a role in that as well. But nobody can convince me, after watching Jaden Ledee this past year, that he's not capable of contributing in the NBA right now.
Because he has skills that play at the NBA level. His size, his rebounding, his mid-range game. It's the defense and the age part of it, which is, I mean, if you want to go the age, okay, fine. But if you look at him, he's got an NBA body. And I would say the athleticism. Like he's not a guy that plays above the rim for his size. He's more of a post up, back you down, also can, hit from the mid range and potentially hit a couple threes or give you some type of outside shooting to lengthen the court. But the athleticism is not top notch. And his age, I guess, if you want to say that's a discredit to him or like something against him.
I guess being drafted, but I shouldn't take away his ability to contribute though in the NBA, because they're not gonna be like, hey, he's really good, but he's 25.
And his defense. But
I feel like his defense was like last year. I thought his defense was almost like underrated because of his physicality. He just gets in your way.
He's fine, but he's not a shot blocker. He's not a guy that's gonna live above the rim. He's not gonna scare anybody down low, like defensively. That's a factor. But again, to the point, we're nitpicking here.
I think
dude's an NBA player.
He's playing in the NBA next year.
Should be in the NBA.
Yeah, I will be. I'm fully convinced Jaden Ledee will play in the NBA next year. I hope I'm right.